It's the Better Business Bureau. Officially, we're the Better Business Bureau of South Central Louisiana because we serve 12 parishes in the south central part of the state. Well, the Better Business Bureau is a business organization, but its primary services are to help consumers make wise buying decisions and doing business with the community in the area that we serve. We have reporting what we call business reviews on the approximately 11,000 businesses in the 12 parishes that we serve. Which gives the consumer or business person an opportunity to find out what kind of reputation the company has in our community, whether they're licensed, if they're required to have a license, are they licensed, are there complaints against the company, are there government action against the company, are there been any problems with claims in their advertising, etc. So we do all that behind the scenes and create a report, or what we call a business review, on businesses in our service area.
I'm going to mention a few things that I'm particularly working on in the Senate, and then I want to leave plenty of time just to throw open the floor and have a conversation about whatever folks want to talk about. But first, let me compliment all of you and the Better Business Bureau. You all serve a tremendously important and vital role in our community in general, certainly including the business community. And fundamentally, the role is furthering the values, the core values the Better Business Bureau stands for: excellence and integrity and teamwork and trust. People look for that in folks they do business with, folks they interact with in any capacity. And those are some of the values and themes I want to talk about today. You know, that's exactly what's so lacking in politics, particularly national politics. Right now, I think the latest Gallup poll has the overall approval rating of Congress at 15%, right around the lowest in history, off by a couple of points. Now, I have two reactions to that. My main reaction as a citizen is, who the heck are these 15%? Because I think they're completely out of touch, not the 85. My second reaction is to ask, you know, what's going on here? And I think fundamentally what's going on is Washington and national politics isn't reflecting those same sorts of core values that I just mentioned, that people want in every aspect of their dealings, in every aspect of their lives, values like excellence, integrity, teamwork, and trust. That's why in all my involvement in politics, I've tried to promote political reform, openness, transparency, reforms that promote those sorts of values. Let me mention a few things that I'm particularly pushing in the Senate. First of all, I think the biggest fundamental reform we could have in politics to open up that openness and transparency and rebuild that sense of trust is term limits. I'm a firm believer in term limits. When I was in the state legislature in Baton Rouge, I authored and passed term limits for the state legislature. And we actually, a lot of folks said we could never do that because it takes a 2/3 vote of each body of the legislature. We don't have the initiative and referendum available in Louisiana, but we did. Through a grassroots movement, we built a lot of pressure, got people together, and we actually forced that through the legislature, legislative term limits. It was on the ballot as a state constitutional amendment, and of course it was passed overwhelmingly by the voters of Louisiana, almost 80%. Well, if we needed it here in Louisiana and Baton Rouge, which we did, we need it 1,000 times more in Washington, and we need it for Congress. And so I have the leading proposal to impose term limits on the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. I think it would help us get back to our roots as a country, which is about having citizen legislators, average citizens to truly represent us, to come from our communities and serve for limited periods of time in Congress. And so I'll continue to push very hard for that. Now, just like it was at the state level, the big hurdle is that this requires a federal constitutional amendment. So the normal route for that requires a 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate. And the key to that is recreating, re-energizing that broad-based grassroots movement that did exist when we passed it here at the state level in 1995. Related to that, I've always been involved in maintaining and passing and heightening strong ethics rules for Congress. In 2007 in particular, I was proud to vote for a bill that updated those rules. It ended gifts from lobbyists, it increased penalties and other enforcement measures. In that bill, I had an amendment to increase the penalties significantly for false disclosures. My amendment established criminal penalties for knowingly and willfully falsifying or failing to file the required information. And that passed by a 93-2 vote, not because a lot of members proactively wanted that, but because we built the grassroots support and the public pressure for that. I also had an amendment to ban immediate family members of Congress from being paid out of campaign funds. Unfortunately, that did not pass. I still have that proposal as a standalone bill, and since 2007, when it didn't pass, unfortunately, you've seen repeated abuses of that sort of practice. So I think that's something we definitely need to revisit. Something else we need to revisit and change are automatic pay raises for members of Congress. Here in Louisiana, it works as it should. If the legislature wants a pay raise, they need to justify that publicly. They need to file, a member needs to file a bill publicly and have an open public debate and an open public vote. Unfortunately, at the federal level, that was changed several years ago, and there are automatic pay raises for members of Congress tied to the inflation index. After an automatic raise happened in 2009, the public was really outraged. You know, folks asked, what is Congress really doing to deserve that? I pushed my proposal, and it's bipartisan, with Claire McCaskill of Missouri, she's a Democrat, to end any of those automatic pay raises and to require any pay raise to go through the normal legislative process. I pushed for a vote on that to end those raises. Harry Reid did a typical insider game. He prevented that vote. He blocked the vote. Then after killing my amendment, he pushed an identical bill out of the Senate, knowing that then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, would make sure that was killed in the House, and that's what happened. So we need to revisit that issue. Now, I think because of the spotlight that was focused on that issue, because of my amendment and my proposal, we have not had any of those automatic pay raises since 2009. We've had annual efforts to block them, which have been successful. But that doesn't happen automatically, so that will be an issue again this fall. And unless we act proactively, an automatic pay raise would kick in January. And the final reform item I wanted to mention, I think really exemplifies what frustrates people the most with Washington right now, and correctly so. It's what I call the Washington exemption from Obamacare. When Obamacare was debated a few years ago, of course I was and remain a strong opponent. One proposal I had as a floor amendment with some other conservatives, though, was whatever the fallback plan for all Americans is. If you remember, initially it was called the public option, went through a few different versions, and then in the final version of the bill, it became known as the exchanges. Whatever the fallback plan is for all Americans, then every member of Congress should be in that plan. No special rules, no special treatment, no special exemption or special subsidy. Somewhat amazingly, that proposal passed on the Senate floor. Again, the discussion, the public pressure allowed us to pass that amendment on the Senate floor. Then, of course, all of Obamacare passed with that provision in it. And then it was a classic example of what Nancy Pelosi said. Oh, I guess we have to pass the bill in order to read it. After passage, some folks in Washington were reading the bill, and they focused on this provision, and they said, oh, you know what? How are we going to deal with this? How can we live with this? So then a massive insider effort started to essentially undo this provision. And there was a full court press lobbying campaign by a lot of congressional and Washington insiders on the Obama administration to issue an executive order, a regulation, to essentially undo large parts of this provision. And that's what happened. About a year and a half ago, President Obama issued a special regulation which is completely contrary to the statute, to the law, and is therefore illegal, in my opinion, to take most or all of the sting out of this provision. And this special regulation basically does two things. First of all, the initial provision said that every member of Congress and all congressional staff had to go to the exchanges. Well, this provision said, well, we don't really mean all congressional staff. And a member of Congress can designate any staff that do not have to follow this provision and do not have to go to the exchanges. Then even more significantly, this special executive order or regulation said, well, for members and any staff who do go to the exchange, they get a big taxpayer-funded subsidy that gets to follow them from the old federal employee health benefits plan. Now, nobody else at that income level gets that type of subsidy on the exchange. It is an absolute special privilege, special subsidy, special exemption, which is not mentioned in any way in the statute. And so I have a real problem with that because it's contrary to the statute, and it really completely defeats the spirit of that provision that said members of Congress and their staff had to walk in the shoes of average Americans who have to go to the exchange, often against their will. Well, to respond to this executive order, I again have legislation to correct the situation and say absolutely no exemption, no subsidy, no special treatment for members of Congress and their staff. And they should be treated exactly the same as those who are forced on to the exchange, again, often against their will. So as I said, I think the biggest reason you see that 15% approval rating in the Gallup polls, you see that palpable sense of distrust of Washington, is lack of transparency, openness, and lack of adherence to those values we talked about. And I think we need further work, further reforms like the ones we mentioned to bridge that gap, to rebuild that trust, to bring citizen legislators back to Congress, and to have Americans truly feel that they're represented properly there. With that, there are plenty of other things we can talk about, a lot of other issue areas I'm very involved in. Traffic relief in Baton Rouge. I'm the top-ranking Republican on the Infrastructure Committee in the Senate, and we're working on a highway bill, and I'm very focused on traffic congestion issues. Other infrastructure that I work on that committee, efforts to reduce small business paperwork and burdens in general on small business, efforts to reduce regulatory burdens. In just a couple hours, I'm hosting a field hearing on EPA's new proposed ozone regulations, which would have a huge negative economic impact in Louisiana, particularly Baton Rouge. So a lot of other things we can talk about, but rather than me drone on, let me throw open the floor as I promised and hear from all of you with comments or questions. Just raise your hand. Who wants to start us off? The Better Business Bureau stands for values in business, integrity, honesty, keeping commitments to customers. And I'm really going to talk about trying to bring that same ethic to Congress and to politics. I think that's what's so lacking in a lot of voters' minds right now. Congressional approval ratings is 15%, one of the lowest in history, and I think it's because that dedication to service, keeping in touch with constituents, reaching out isn't there. And I'm going to focus on some of the initiatives I have in Congress to try to promote those same sort of general values.
Who are members of the Better Business Bureau?
We currently have about 1,300 members in the 12 parishes, and they are all businesses that have met a criteria and have agreed to standards, to ethical business practices in our community. And then they have committed to be a participant with the Better Business Bureau and provide services to the community.
What is the value in membership?
Well, it's a network. It's a networking opportunity. It also enhances your opportunity of creating a better customer relations with your customers and clients. And it's an overall commitment to ethics in our business community that will help consumers make better decisions in who they do business with.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
They can call the Better Business Bureau at 346-5222, or they can go to our website, batonrouge.bbb.org.